What is going on, everybody? Welcome into a very special sort of presentation by Alarm Fantasy Football. We've thrown Alarm Fantasy Football to the side today. Why? Because you got it. Look at this full house we've got going on here for Plant Your Flags. That's right. Everybody wants to know who's your guy, who's the player you're taking the most this year, who's the player you think is going to not only provide exceptional fantasy value, but be, a strong pick throughout the entire year. Our illustrious panel here, absolutely love this crew. We'll start off here. I got John Impemba. Twitter handles are right there. If you're not following these kids, you better follow them. Damn it. John Impemba, who's, do I have to give? I don't need to give time.
I was gonna say, do you not know what I do here, Bender? Like, what do we got?
Because you do everything.
What is it you say you do?
What would you say that you do? Yeah.
What? There you go.
What
John Impemba, the
what
Swiss Army knife of Fantasy Alarm. We use him in a number of different roles here. Andrew Cooper, lead NFL analyst. Kev Tompkins, NFL analyst. Britt Flinn, I don't know, better than the boys, NFL analyst. How about that? Right? That's your.
Yeah.
What's that?
Can't really argue. Well, I'll say she's better than me in fantasy football, but not a better singer.
Yeah.
All right. Well, what's going on, everybody? Thank you for tuning in. Why don't you shut it, Coop? We only have an hour to get through our flag plants here, man. Only an hour.
Sing off next episode.
Oh my God! Somebody, I wish I had the power to mute you in this chat right now.
Alarm Fantasy Football After Dark sing off. Let's go.
All right, I'm muted.
You know what? Maybe if there's time later on, we will we'll happily do that. In the meantime, folks, what we're doing today, like I said, we're gonna plant our flags. Each person's gonna give. We have 3 players each. There's an article over at fantasyalarm.com/flagplants. You can actually go to fantasyalarm.com/flagplants. Earn Dog, if you could put that maybe on the ticker at the bottom there so that everybody knows exactly where to go so that they can see the actual write-ups that we've done. Each one of us has picked 3 players who we're going to plant our flag in this season. And for better or for worse, that's who we're sticking with for this entire year. So at Fantasy Receipts, you are officially on notice because we ain't scared.
No fear.
No fear whatsoever. So we've got a ton of stuff to get to here. And you know what? I'm just going to go right into it right now. First and foremost, everybody, again, I don't think we need to define what a flag plant is, do we? Is everybody in agreement here what a flag plant is? Does anybody have something different from what I said earlier?
No.
I believe so.
No.
I just said that mine might be in cement rather than planted.
Well, that's fine. That's fine too, as long as we know that you're sticking to it, and when Fantasy Receipts comes calling, that you're not hiding from nobody on that. So
it's not like the Baker Mayfield flag plant where it just came back at him because it wouldn't go into the ground.
It's true.
Yeah, I guess the one thing I would say is the difference between a flag plant and just a player you like is that you're taking a lot of times a flag plant ahead of ADP. So there's more inherent risk, right? If you're giving up the value on the other side. So we're going in. Britt, she's putting hers in cement. So
yeah, this isn't a bold predictions thing. We do bold predictions. We have a bold predictions article in the Fantasy Alarm Draft Guide. You can check all that out too. This is players we're in on, players we've been in on, and players that when we're on the clock, we're drafting.
We're staking our reputation on these players.
There you go. Staking our reputations on these players. Before we get started here, I want to shout out to our show sponsor, Underdog Fantasy. Go to fantasyalarm.com/underdog. Use that promo code ALARM. It gets you 100% match deposit up to $100 for first-time depositors. Playing the Best Ball Mania 4, the weekly winners, the Pick'em contest, the higher or lower on stat lines for players. You know it. You want it. fantasyalarm.com/underdog. And then use that promo code ALARM for a 100% match deposit up to $100. Let's get going here right now, right away. Coop, your first flag. What they're going to do, they're going to give their flag plant. They're going to tell you why. And then the rest of us are going to poke holes in that theory if we can, if we want to.
Let's go. Okay,
We might
so I'll go
agree.
first. I'll go
for it.
first here. And so to John's point, an example of like a bold take is when I've said stuff like, oh, Michael Thomas could lead the Saints. That's something that's a bold take. I think it could happen. These are things I think truly believe will happen. And for me, I do a ton of deep diving on all these crazy stats, looking at film, looking at metrics, trying to find out who could break out and get the targets. But for some of these guys, it doesn't need to be that hard. Deontay Johnson, for me, is a easy flag plant because he already gets the targets. They talk about targets being earned. This guy's gotten over 140 targets 3 years in a row. And I personally look at somebody like Evan Engram, where he was good with the shell of Eli Manning, and then he wasn't that good with the mess with Daniel Jones and the rest of the offense. And then he played with a QB ascending in Trevor Lawrence, and he was good again. I look at this situation, and this guy has been wide receiver 6, 2, and 6 in targets the last 3 years. And the year before last, the last year of Big Ben, he was wide receiver 8 in PPR. Wide receiver 8. Right now, he goes off the board at wide receiver 31, right? So if Kenny Pickett just takes a small step forward, he doesn't need to be Trevor Lawrence. He just takes a small step forward, and this guy gets the targets that he gets every year, then Deontay Johnson is easily a wide receiver 2, and I think that he could be a wide receiver 1. So wide receiver 31 off the board, smash pick for me. I'm picking him well before that, but I mean, you could take him if he's wide receiver 31, you could easily take him at wide receiver 25 after all the wide receiver 2s are gone, and you got yourself a guy who's pretty much locked in as wide receiver 2, could be wide receiver 1. So Deontay Johnson, super smash flag plant in cement, as Britt Flinn might say.
I love jumping on guys that haven't scored any touchdowns last year because that turns everybody off from them. It worked for Miles Sanders the year before. It's going to work for Deontay Johnson. I love this one here. How about the rest of you guys?
No arguments for me here. I took him in the family draft, so I'm all about some Deontay Johnson this season.
Yeah, it's like the easiest 140 targets you can draft in like the 5th round. Like,
Crazy.
What are we doing?
I don't know, man. I don't know. That's wild. So, Britt, what are your thoughts? You in, you out?
Yeah, I'm totally in on him. I think that this Steelers offense is going to improve their efficiency. They're going to score a little bit more. Their offensive line's better. Kenny Pickett's taking that second-year step forward. And while I'm not completely convinced on him being a QB2, I do believe in the targets that Deontay Johnson's going to get.
Yeah.
All right, no arguments there. We're starting off all nice and harmonious, but don't worry, there's conflict coming. Britt Flinn, your first flag plant in cement, please.
So in cement, mine is that Brandon Ayuk, currently the wide receiver 25, is going to be a high-end wide receiver 2 to Deebo Samuel, who is wide receiver 18, finishing as a wide receiver 4 or low-end wide receiver 3. Now, I don't know how bold this is, but it's a flag that I'm planting. And if you followed the 2022 Fantasy Football Hot Takes article on Fantasy Alarm last year, I said that Brandon Ayuk was going to overtake Deebo Samuel as the wide receiver 1 by the end of the season. Not only did that happen, but Ayuk was on fire. He's gotten better in this offseason. Deebo Samuel himself said that nobody can cover him in a phone booth. That's how much separation Brandon Ayuk gets. And I think with a game manager type quarterback like Brock Purdy, when Deebo Samuel is facing those contested catches and Brandon Ayuk is out there wide open, who's he going to pick? He's going to go to Brandon Ayuk, and he is going to smash in fantasy this year.
Wow, Britt not only planting her Brandon Ayuk flag, but planting it on the grave of Deebo Samuel.
I have to stay on brand.
Yeah.
By the way, it doesn't matter whether these aren't supposed to be bold, Britt. So don't worry about it. I have one later on that's the least bold flag plant possible. So this isn't about being bold. This is about being right about your guys. So Brandon Ayuk, who I keep drafting every time I go bully RB, he ends up being my wide receiver 1. I got no issues here. How about the rest of you kids?
I'll point one thing out. When you go over to the underdog higher or lowers, they actually have Ayuk ahead of Deebo for receiving yards and touchdowns in virtually every stat. So, the folks that are setting the numbers are higher on Deebo, yet when you go to their ADP, they're higher on Ayuk, but when you go to their ADP, Deebo's going first. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense.
Yeah, the fantasy projections are caught up of Deebo's rushing yardage 2 years ago. They think that he's still going to get that usage when Christian McCaffrey is now in town and does that better than Deebo does. We talked about this last year, Coop, when we saw how high Debo is going in drafts, and again we see it here where Debo's a don't touch for me. I haven't drafted him in a single league, and anybody who asks me if they should draft Debo, I tell them no. So I am out completely on Debo Samuel.
Kev, thoughts?
No, I'm perfectly good with that. I think Debo's like one of those guys. It felt like a nice click the last couple of years, but this year, just where he goes, that middle, when you're talking in the Keenan Allen, Calvin Ridley range of like wide receivers, and then even you could see Mark Andrews there. You could see maybe the top end, next tier of, you had the Breece Halls, Ramondre Stevenson's. Like Debo Samuel seems like the worst click out of all of those guys at every other position. So for that, I'm kind of staying away from maybe that specific tier of wide receivers. So Debo, he's a guy where I'll draft him if he falls, but I'm not really reaching up for him.
All right.
So I like Ayuk over him for sure.
All right. So we're all kind of in that boat there. Look at that. 2 for 2 on the crew. Uh-oh. John Impemba, you're up, my friend.
Yeah, listen, my flag plant here is going to be on Jahmyr Gibbs. This has been a kind of a contentious topic across fantasy Twitter and the value of Jahmyr Gibbs this season. And I just simply look at the usage that we've seen out of someone like DeAndre Swift in this offense the last couple of seasons. A lot of people look at the David Montgomery signing and look at what Jamal Williams did last year, and they say, this is the guy to draft. Jamal Williams played more than 50% of the offensive snaps just one time last year, and that was with obviously DeAndre Swift missing a ton of playing time. But 2 seasons ago, the reason why everybody was looking to draft DeAndre Swift at the end of the first round was because despite only playing 13 games in a full PPR league, DeAndre Swift was a top 10 running back in PPR scoring per game. Now you're looking at Jahmyr Gibbs, where everybody is telling me that his elite skill is at receiving the football. We know that Jared Goff is looking to throw down, and he doesn't need an elite number of rushing yards to be a top 10, top 12 fantasy football running back purely because of his pass catching upside. And you can go back and look at similar running backs that have sort of a potential profile and situation in terms of how this offense may be used. When you look at Alvin Kamara's rookie year at Mark Ingram, where Ingram had over 1,100 yards and double-digit touchdowns, and Kamara came in with a little over 700, but had 800 yards receiving. Coop, I think, tweeted out a few weeks back that James White once put up a top 12, I think it was, PPR fantasy season with like 400 rushing yards. They had a whole bunch of receiving yards. So Jahmyr Gibbs does not need to be this game-changing, bell cow, 3-down back to be an elite PPR fantasy football running back here. People get caught too much on the David Montgomery and Jamal Williams touchdowns last year. Jamal Williams had 28 carries inside the 5-yard line. That was the most in football. The next closest running back was Elliott with only 16. What are the odds that the Lions get that many opportunities inside the 5? And who's to say that Jahmyr Gibbs, if he stays healthy, is going to be scoring from outside the 10 when he gets the ball between, where he is in that offense? So give me Jahmyr Gibbs as my first flag pan, as a guy that I think is going to excel this season in fantasy football.
All right, I'll push back on this one. We got to have some disagreement on this show. All right. Here's the thing with Jahmyr Gibbs, and I like him as a player. I love him in Dynasty. The thing with the top 10 is that if you go to Underdog Fantasy and look at where he's being drafted top 10. So you better believe he's going to finish top 10 if you're drafting him where he goes top 10. The problem that you run into is guys like Alvin Kamara and James White with the partial snap shares. They needed to find pay dirt, and they needed to find it often. James White, the year he was an RB1, scored 12 times. Alvin Kamara, the year that him and Mark Ingram did their thing, he scored 13 times. So with Jahmyr Gibbs, you really do need him to not only be hyper efficient with his partial snap share, but to score a bunch of touchdowns. I'm not saying it can't happen. I've said many times that if I was going to pick one team to have a Mark Ingram RB7, Alvin Kamara RB3 situation, I would pick this team. It's just it's a bit of a thin needle to thread, my boy. So personally, I am picking him at RB10, hoping he finishes RB10 is a little bit dangerous compared to some of the other guys for me personally. So I'll let you do the Jahmyr Gibbs drafting, and I'm taking guys like Joe Mixon.
I've seen him go later, obviously in redraft. If you're looking at best ball, then maybe obviously then there's different ADPs to look at. So sure, Underdog Fantasy saying he's a top 10 running back, going as a top 10 running back is fine. But he's also falling in drafts as well. So I guess it all
Right.
depends on where you're at.
That's true. That's true.
Falling in
See,
drafts.
I just use Underdog ADP because I love Underdog.
I love
They're
Underdog too.
My
Do
very
you have a
favorite.
promo code for them? I think?
Britt, what do you
I
got for
think
us
we
here?
do. Alarm.
yeah.
Easy,
So
guys.
I actually,
Let everybody's got to speak, guys. Come on.
I just have some pushback in the form of history. So Jahmyr Gibbs was selected with the 12th pick overall. Historically, 11 of the last 12 running backs drafted in the first round saw 200 plus touches in their rookie season. And there's really no indication that Gibbs is going to see less than that. And for context, Tony Pollard, who was RB7 in PPR leagues last season, only saw 232 touches. So I think this avenue is wide open for Jahmyr Gibbs to return on his ADP.
Yeah, and as far as Gibbs goes, like I have no problem with Gibbs. Trust me, I love the young, sexy rookies as much as anybody, even probably way more than anybody else. But I mean, if Bijan Robinson wasn't in this draft, if he wasn't a rookie as well, like we'd probably be taking Gibbs earlier. And him at RB10 and Underdog is like I love him, but it seems kind of wild considering it's a half-point PPR site when we're talking about NFC and things like that are full PPR FFPC. Like that is where I'm going to maybe take a reach on him. Like in Britt and our Pros vs. Joes, he went 205, I believe. Like I think that's a good spot for him in a full PPR draft. So I love Gibbs. I think 200 touches plus, and I think with this Lions offense ascending, I think it's a good spot for him. I think his ADP, I want to say it's high. I mean, it's high for Underdog, but I think where you're really going to get the value is in full PPR formats.
I have a huge issue with, just him in general, just in the sense of what we're looking at and what we're doing. His ADP, not only is it too high for me, but on the other hand, it's climbing. Like you're going to see him at the back end of the second round in over the next 2 weeks. The hype is getting that crazy about it. My feeling about this here, and I've said this in my, I got a murder hornet flying around here. So my big thing here is that, yes, where you're taking him, it is too high. And I do look to, David Montgomery in there, who is also a pass catcher. All right. He didn't get utilized too much in Chicago with that, but that was Chicago's system. And so, again, you can't cite Alvin Kamara's targets because Alvin Kamara was in a Joe Lombardi system, which catered to that. You have to look at like individual players within the systems, and this system doesn't really scream heavy pass catching, heavy, targets to the running backs. They say that Jahmyr Gibbs is going to line up in the slot. Okay, fine. That takes Amon-Ra St. Brown out of the slot, which is where he was most productive last season. So why do we want to, do that? Why do we want to take that out of the, take Amon-Ra out of his comfort zone to throw in Jahmyr Gibbs there? My big concern here is that we're overdrafting him as a guy who could be Theo Riddick, could end up being, I mean, I'm sure that there are a ton of other pass catching running backs that we got all sorts of crazy hype about, but let's face it, they just never really delivered on the fantasy stuff. And if he's not going to be picking up rushing yards and it's only relying on receiving, well, then I have a hard time taking him as a running back where he's going right now.
I will throw one thing to John's point. Last night we covered on this channel a $5,000 entry draft, and one of the guys, $5,000 buy-in, he took Jahmyr Gibbs in the second round, and then he also took David Montgomery in the fourth round as his RB1 and RB2. So he believes in the Mark Ingram, Alvin Kamara possibility. So it's not just John.
I wouldn't necessarily say that the offense doesn't condone to throwing the running back when Swift had 70 targets last year and 78 the year before that when he was not on the field for most of the season. He played 14 games in 13 games, but we know exactly how healthy and often he was out there, and yet they still threw to him a fair bit of time. I don't think you're drafting a guy with the skill set of Jahmyr Gibbs 12th overall to throw to David Montgomery. I don't think that's doesn't seem like it would make too much sense, but it's the NFL. We see Taysom Hill on the field all the time. So
True. All right. Kev Tompkins, you're up with your first flag plant.
Yeah, literally just talked about the young and sexy rookies, and I've got one here. Jordan Addison will be a top 24 wide receiver this year. Ever since our draft spectacular that we had the night of the draft, I've been banging the drum on Jordan Addison. Was the last of 4 consecutive wide receiver picks in the first round. He has a little bit of size limitations at 175 pounds, but the dude gets to play next to Justin Jefferson, planet Earth's alpha wide receiver. When you look at the situation with the Vikings, Jefferson and Adam Thielen ran the most and second most pass routes in the NFL, and KJ Osborne was 14th in the NFL as the third wide receiver. So Thielen is gone. Now Jordan Addison comes in as a first-round pick and is easily going to clear 85 to 90, possibly higher, of routes in this offense. No doubt should put him at top 12 in raw pass routes this year. No competition for backups whatsoever. Guys like Jalen Reagor, Jalen Naylor. When you look at like week 15 last year when they played the Colts, the Vikings did. Each of those guys between Hawkinson, Thielen, Osborne, Jefferson all ran about 60 routes each in that game. Jalen Reagor ran a total in 2022 of 52 pass routes. There is no competition from anybody else behind him at all. Even, you're talking about the backup tight end, backup running backs. That's just not how they do it. Kevin O'Connell plays a completely condensed personnel with the Vikings. And then you look at their fifth highest raw pass rate, sixth highest pass rate over expectation last year, subtracting Dalvin Cook, adding Alexander Madison as the starter. And we know that's kind of murky with Ty Chandler possibly coming in to muddy those waters. The defense is bad in Minnesota. Kevin O'Connell himself said Addison will get the easiest looks in the NFL. When you're playing it alongside Justin Jefferson, I don't see how he doesn't. So unless something catastrophic happens, Jordan Addison will be one of the best values at wide receiver 38 in the early 7th round to be a top 24 wide receiver this year.
I got nothing negative to say about Jordan Addison and the Kevin O'Connell offense right now.
I'll tell you, my policy on these guys is I've been indifferent. I take Justin Jefferson, and I have a hard time deciding who's going to get more targets out of Hawkinson or Jordan Addison. And that uncertainty, I just kind of stay away from both. But there's no, if people want to jump on one or the other and they feel strongly, I have no problem with that.
To me, this feels like one of those offenses where you could see the rare 300 target guys, right? Given the offense with O'Connell, how they want to throw the football, kept pointing out the bad defense and the running back that isn't really as big in the passing game as Dalvin Cook could have been. That's where I look at it. And I do think Addison obviously a step up over Adam Thielen, given where he was at his point in his career. So I've been very bullish on Cousins for this reason, and I'm fine grabbing any of the other pass-catching options in that offense for
the only team in the league last year to have 3 guys get 100-plus targets was the Minnesota Vikings. So it would be a good pick. The caveat to that, of course, is that Adam Thielen was on pace for 100 before Hawk came and wasn't after. So
sure.
A little bit of an asterisk there, but yeah, this team is the only team to do it last year, so they would be my bet to do it this year as well. Especially with the fullback and Josh Oliver just doing useless non-target snaps, right? Just not soaking up targets. It really consolidates things.
Britt, if you got anything to add, or I do move on to my flag play. You're shaking me off. You're like, nope, I'm good. Okay. All right. You sure? Positive? I can't hear you.
Good.
Oh, there's your mic. There you are.
Speak now or forever hold your peace.
You speak now or forever hold your peace. Absolutely. All right. My first flag plant here, I'm going to go with, and I've not been shy about this, Bijan Robinson. Probably the first rookie running back who I've been taking as high as he's been going. His ADP, according to Underdog Fantasy right now, is 7.70. And I got no problem with that whatsoever. Listen, Zeke Elliott came into the league as a rookie and absolutely dominated for over 1,600 yards. Granted, it was a different offense, but it was also an offense that didn't feed the run as much as Arthur Smith's going to do here in Atlanta. I've said it a million times. I'll say it a million times more. Arthur Smith loves to run the football. And even with Tyler Algier, hanging around there, they did not take him 8th overall in the NFL draft in order to have Tyler Algier get that big of a share. Maybe he serves as a complimentary back, helps kind of, run out the clock late in the game. Who knows? But Bijan Robinson, as advertised, he'll be in the passing game as well as in the running game. So I'm 100% in on Bijan. I am not shy about taking him early first round, no doubt.
Yeah, I'll just go on record and verbally retweet all of that. I love Bijan. The fact that he fell to 13th in the Queen's Classic is just mind-boggling to me because this guy's absolutely going to smash And I think that he can make a case for RB1 overall.
Yeah, I've made this mistake before in the past where I said Saquon Barkley's a rookie. I'm not drafting him. And then I was completely wrong. So I'm just not going to make that mistake again. I'm willing to take, there's 5 running backs I love. I'm willing to take any of them in the first round. And Bijan is absolutely one of them. I have him at 3, I think.
That
Yeah,
boy's good. That's all I got.
That's all, nobody's got nothing. Listen, I'm saying it, man. If I walk out of the first round with either Barkley, Bijan, or Nick Chubb, I am a happy camper.
I think I've usually gone Chubb over Bijan Robinson, but I mean, I'm fine going either, really.
Bijan Robinson is so good that I was at a bar with my mom watching on mute, and she looks at me and she goes, "That guy right there is good, huh?" While he's doing drills. And I was like, "You know who that is?" And she's like, "No." I was like, "Yeah, that guy is good." Like, even my mom, her eye test, she's like, "That guy is just way better than these other guys, huh?" I was like, "Yes, he is."
Sellers, I ain't making no point about Jahmyr Gibbs versus Bijan Robinson, because to me, it's not even close, because Bijan is an actual running back. Jahmyr Gibbs is a glorified pass catcher who needs to make his way. So you're not going to sell me on Gibbs one bit. I mean, hey, there's zero chance that I'm taking Gibbs where he's going in drafts versus Bijan. Zero. Britt, you're going to have to slap that dude around for me. As soon as this show's over, if I don't see like a video of you backhanding Sellers, just being like, "Stop it." Bender says, "Shut up." I want to see
He's
that.
out running mail. I think the government's backhanding him enough today.
Are they backhanding him or are they bending him over? Either way. Come on.
Yeah.
Let's give it up for the U.S. mail. All right. So there you go. That's our first round of flag plants here. Let's move on to round 2. John Impemba, you're up first.
Listen, this is another guy that I've been championing pretty heavily, and that is Daniel Jones. I think Daniel Jones is in line to give us yet another top 10 fantasy quarterback performance here. A lot of people will look at his rushing yardage last year and consider that to be an outlier. And, is 700 yards a repeatable number for him rushing the football? Even if he takes a little bit of a step back, I also think it's kind of, borderline, ignorant to think that he's not going to continue to increase his ability to throw the football under Brian Daboll here. I don't think that you can count on him to just completely regress given the same system that is being a part of here. You got another year with the same offensive coordinator. You got another year with the same head coach here to continue to sort of build upon his skill set, given the systems that he's been a part of before, where a lot of people kind of look at him and be like, well, he's kind of wasted 4 years and he's kind of been a bust and this and that. But we know how disorganized and dysfunctional the New York Giants have been over the last couple of years. And I believe in Brian Daboll as a head coach and an offensive system that he can put in place. You saw his Josh Allen's development under Brian Daboll. And while I'm not considering to say that Daniel Jones is giving the same playing field as Josh Allen, you saw Josh Allen's mobility come into a big part here. Daniel Jones does have a season of over 400 rushing yards already on his ledger. So who's to say he doesn't take a slight step back when it comes to rushing yardage, but still maintains a 500 rushing yard total here because he is a mobile quarterback. And then you will see his passing game take a step forward. They got him Darren Waller. And while we don't like to predict injuries here, so I'll just assume Waller is able to stay healthy. We know how good he looked during camp and at preseason. I like the drafting of Jalen Hyatt here. I think Daniel Jones is poised to take another step forward with a good head coach, and I think they're going to get the most out of this player. And that mobility alone should give him a nice little floor to reach the top 10 quarterback level that I'm looking for.
My guy, a friend of the show, Jorge Martin, I was talking to him, and he pointed out that if you take Kirk Cousins and Jared Goff, very similar players that, like John described, that just great passers, that combo on something like Underdog, you're getting so many matchups. Both teams, they play each other twice, which is there was going to be shootouts. They both play the Chiefs. They both play the Chargers, right? You're getting all these crazy matchups. So just waiting and doing something like that, you can draft 2 QBs that aren't even going in the top 12 and potentially have just shootouts all year long. And even in redraft, like the way the schedule matches up, you could start Goff week 1 versus the Chiefs, and then week 2 you start Cousins versus the Chargers. So I kind of like that. I'm coming around on drafting those guys.
But Daniel Jones isn't going to put up a 4-point game like Kirk Cousins. Like John said, that rushing floor is a very, very safe bet when you're going with him. You don't have to worry about that boom or bust situation with him like you do Cousins or even Goff for that matter.
Yeah. Daniel Jones, man, but what worries me is like the touchdowns. How many touchdowns is he going to throw? I have trouble drafting Jones just because the guy's going around him. How many touchdowns do you think Daniel Jones throws?
25.
That would be great. That would be the most he's ever thrown.
I mean, you really think he's only going to throw 15? I mean, again,
He's
like
not
John
right.
said, second year
the
learning the
argument.
system. He's got, a new weapon in Darren Waller. Granted, the receivers aren't that great, but I mean, I don't know, man. I mean, even Lamar Jackson in his second year actually, threw plenty more touchdown passes in that second season.
Well, underdog on the pick'em has him right around 17. So that's a good pick'em bet.
I'll take higher.
24.
Good pick'em higher.
So he threw 24 touchdowns as a rookie. So it's not, and then we've seen the disaster that has been the Giants offense really since then. I'm just a big believer in good coaching brings the best out of players. We see that with Bill Belichick and the Patriots scoop. He's taken, Cole turned him into diamonds more often than not. And I believe Daboll, being a pretty legitimate offensive mind and head coach in this league, is going to get the best out of Daniel Jones here.
Fine.
Have I ever led you wrong at quarterbacks?
No, that's why it hurts, because you continue to convince me to grab Daniel Jones, even though he goes right with the Cousins and the Genos and the Goffs that I like. But all right, I'm in. Let's go. Daniel Jones.
I'd much rather have Daniel Jones than the Cousins and the Genos and the Goffs. Oh my God.
Fine.
Anyone else? Daniel Jones going
Like
sold.
I was going to say, just any, if he could throw over, get in like the 3,500 range, throw 25 touchdowns, and maybe get down to 600 yards from 700 that he has last year, he might be top 6.
There you go. Fine.
Just saying, it's in the range.
It's doable. It's not like not like a pie in the sky thing either.
Right.
Yeah, right. The rushing makes all the difference in that group.
Yeah.
So okay.
Scott Frankel says, "I'll bet anybody that Jones over 20 touchdown passes." Yeah, we're not against that at all.
Benedict.
Kev, your next flag plant, my friend.
Absolutely. We just talked about one Atlanta Falcon. Let's talk about another who I think is primed for a second-year breakout, even further than what he did last year, because last year was fantastic. It's Drake London, who I think finishes as a top 12 wide receiver this season. Now, we know Arthur Smith has done some very dumb things with his skill position players, Kyle Pitts, but I think he's done Drake London right as a rookie. Over 115 targets, 85% routes on the season, 2.07 yards per route run, 29% target share. Certainly inflated because of the poor passing volume at Atlanta. But the 4 games that London played with Desmond Ridder, he averaged 9 targets, 83 yards per game, wide receiver 18 in that span. And then with Ridder, in his 4 starts, they went up by 6 passing attempts a game, the team did, over Marcus Mariota. So I think the offense, kind of that perception of the Atlanta Falcons is still keeping his price down a little bit. In that wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 range on Underdog, currently going as wide receiver 23. So while they have toyed with Pitts, the Falcons have, into kind of making him a blocker, maybe they're going to take him out on jumbo packages. The one guy that's not coming out is Drake London. So we can have some more touchdown regression as well. Certainly positive. Looking at from a team perspective, Atlanta threw the ball 412 times last year. They can add 100 with that, with a full season of Ridder. It doesn't seem like a lot because we're only getting up to 515 pass attempts. That would have been still bottom 8 in the league. But 100 pass attempts is 100 pass attempts. You add 25 of those to London, assuming a 25% target share, and you're looking at flirting with the top 10. And so if this offense takes a step up under Desmond Ridder, I think you can see a true breakout from Drake London this year. And I'm looking at that as a top 12 play.
If you look at what London did with Desmond Ridder in those final 4 games that Ridder started, he averaged 83.5 yards per game, which would have put him in like the top 8 of all wide receivers if that had been season long. And I think Ridder is a much better passer than Marcus Mariota. And yeah, I'm in total agreement with you. People are sleeping on London big time.
Yeah, and with a strong, powerful ground game, like that's the thing. Like you looked at the end of last year, Tyler Algier was was, a monster late in the season, and that opened things up for Drake London that much more. So I can dig that one. Coop,
Yep.
John?
Rising tide lifts all ships, man. Like you look at the top teams in terms of getting first downs, it was all the teams that were scoring the most points. Kansas City Chiefs, Eagles, Buffalo, Minnesota. That's what this game is about. First downs and touchdowns. And if Bijan can help them get more first downs, that's going to be more opportunities for everybody. So I'm taking Pitts too, but as Kev pointed out, Pitts is the one that has to deal with having to stay in line and block. That's not a problem for Drake London. He doesn't have to deal with that same issue with Arthur Smith.
I don't have any shares of London yet, but it's not a guy I'm avoiding. There's just someone in that range that I've been drafting more often than that. But I think Heineke might actually be better for that passing offense than Ritter if that swap was to ever make happen.
Don't say Heineke's name 3 times. Better Boss will appear.
I know, right?
Please no. Coop, you're up. Your next flag plant, sir.
It's Richie James. No, I'm just kidding. That's better boss. That's a better boss flag plant. Now, my flag plant's a guy I've talked about a ton on this show, on all these shows. It's Miles Sanders. And the thing about Miles Sanders is he's always been an efficient runner. He's been a good player. The problem is that the Philadelphia Eagles, they had a quarterback who had the second most carries inside the 5-yard line in the league of anyone. We talked about Jamal Williams earlier, who is 1. Jalen Hurts himself was 2. And when you talk about a team that threw the ball to the running back the least amount of any team, it was the Eagles, right? They have a mobile QB. That's what they do. And I even looked back at like Doug Peterson with Boston Scott and Miles Sanders in 2019. Doug Peterson threw 39 screen passes to the running backs. And Miles Sanders himself had 19. Last year, Nick Sirianni only threw 11 total to the running backs, and Miles Sanders had 3. Boston Scott had 3. These guys combined for over 30. Frank Reich, the coach, when he had Nyheim Hines and a healthy Jonathan Taylor, 40 screen passes to the running backs. Scott Fitterer said straight up on video, hey, remember when you caught 50 balls? We love that. That's why you're here. So Miles Sanders in this situation, as long as the groin is good, they paid him the highest paid free agent running back to do all the high leverage work, catch all the passes, do all the goal line running, everything. If this team is at least reasonably productive, then Miles Sanders could potentially have a career year here.
I'm in on Sanders too. I got nothing here.
Yeah.
You keep taking him in drafts with me before I can take him. That's been driving me nuts this year.
I just say what I've seen in the preseason. I'm a little worried about Carolina's offense as a whole. That offensive line is worrying me. But I do like your point about the usage. I think the usage is going to be there. That's
the one concern. They went out and got a new quarterback, 3 wide receivers, new tight end, new running back. It's a brand new offense. It could just face plant. So that is the one concern for me.
Yeah, the rookie quarterback is obviously the worry because they're untested and most rookie quarterbacks tend to struggle. So most, maybe not all of them, Britt.
Well, hopefully he struggles in the direction of dumping it down to the running back a million times.
Right.
I just can't with Miles Sanders. So I will say this. I will throw out a caveat here. Where he was being drafted before all, Jerry Jeudy and all the JSN got hurt, he was going in a range a little bit higher in like the 60s overall on Underdog, where I would rather be drafting wide receivers or like a George Kittle or a Kyle Pitts, stuff like that. Now with the end of the big wide receiver tier being a little bit murky, when now we're in the Gabe Davis, Jahan Dotson's getting steamed up now. We're looking at Marquise Brown. We're looking at the JSNs and Judys that are hurt. You have to make those decisions. I guess Miles Sanders looks better there, but I'm still stuck on the fact that I just don't think Carolina is going to be winning a lot of games. I know they're at a 7.5 over-under win total, but I cannot just see them with a bunch of spare parts. Granted, good offensive line. I'm just drafting Chuba Hubbard much later, getting my exposure that way than Miles Sanders. But I understand the argument. Like I said, there's good people on both sides.
Chuba Hubbard couldn't beat out Donta Foreman. Forget Chuba Hubbard.
It is true. He couldn't. He sucks.
Thanks. I didn't want to say it because now you're going to summon Linda.
Because Chuba's mom watches the show. We know that already.
Chuba's mom, aka Linda. You can't be slandering Oklahoma State. You can't be slandering Oklahoma State players on our show like that, Howard. She will show up.
She will. All right, let's keep the party bus rolling on here. Britt Flinn, your second flag plant.
That Ezekiel Elliott, currently the RB 49 on Underdog, will finish as an RB2. and I'm so sick of hearing efficiency this, efficiency that. Zeke was used in short yardage, third down situations. He didn't have to run and be efficient. Now with the Patriots, he's being used in goal line situations. He's being used in the passing game. And last year, he also faced a stacked box at the 6th highest rate in the entire league and still finished as RB22. I think that Bill Belichick is going to use him as he should in goal line situations. That touchdown equity alone is going to buoy him up, and getting a return of 25 running back spots is music to my ears.
I'll let the resident Patriots guys kind of throw in here if you have anything.
John?
I mean, I don't really have much because they did like to use both running backs, both Damian Harris and Ramondre Stevenson. And we know, as you mentioned, the efficiency that Ezekiel Elliott had in those short yardage games. And Coop liked to point out a lot of times, yards per carry wise, Elliott's yards per carry is going to obviously be a little bit lesser than Tony Pollard, because Elliott was getting all of those short yardage, runs and in the goal line runs, and it just kind of kills your overall average there. But he was very good at converting in those short yardage situations, is something that Ramondre Stevenson at times had struggled with. My biggest worry is that the Patriots offensive line is absolute garbage. And then Coop and I ran down their schedule on Wednesday's Quick Out show. That schedule the Patriots have is a brutal. They face the AFC East, obviously the NFC East as well, and then they're facing some tough outer divisional opponents. I mean, they got a stretch where they're going up against like the Steelers, they have the Cowboys, the Eagles, the Giants, like all those really tough front sevens. Running the football, I think, is going to be really difficult for the Patriots. I don't even know where they're going to get the 6.5 wins that Vegas says that they're going to have. I am not high on my team, unfortunately, this year of doing much of anything.
Yeah, with all the yards per carry talk, I think the Tony Pollard folks that have been, screaming about that for so long are going to learn this year that when your running back is the guy that's asked to get 1 yard on 3rd and 1 at the 1 yard line and he scores a goal line touchdown, that hurts your yards per carry. Guys like Alvin Kamara and Austin Eckler, when they became the goal line backs, their yards per carry all came down. So the yards per carry stuff, forget about it. With Zeke Elliott, I'm honestly more willing to draft him at ADP than I am Ramondre Stevenson right now, just because I've seen how this team has operated for 20 some odd years and what they want to do and what they did do with Bill O'Brien as the coach in 2011. So I'm worried about Stevenson, and I'd rather take Zeke at RB40 than take Stevenson where he's currently going.
I agree. Yards per carry be damned, but let's talk about the yards, rushing yards over expectation per attempt, the yards that he's supposed to get, which is context driven. He had the 4th worst at 35% success rate. Only Najee Harris, Michael Carter, and Leonard Fournette were worse than Zeke Elliott per attempt last season on yards that he's supposed to get. So yards per carry can be kind of thrown out there, but the yards that he was supposed to get, even in short yardage, he wasn't even getting those. So I do have some pause in even just considering Zeke Elliott. I understand the merit. You're really hoping that he's like Garrett Blount light if he's going to pay off his ADP. I mean, he doesn't even have to be that to kind of pay that off, but just I could see him either bottoming out even further. I mean, say goodbye to his receiving profile. It's cratered the last 3 years in yards per out run, but it's like almost seems to me it's almost one of the worst clicks on the board at that point when you're.
I only value statistics that are 50 characters or less. So whatever you just said there, yards per carry over expected average first touch, I just ignore.
I'll send you a link.
Thanks.
It's on
those
touchdown only league. Touchdown only league, okay. Touchdown only league, fine. But other than that, I don't really have very high expectations for Zeke. No. To finish as an RB2, I don't know, man. I think that's just a little much. I mean, even with Belichick kind of splitting that workload amongst these guys, I just worry about. Like, because this is a guy that you're not gonna want to put him into your lineup on the regular. This is a guy who's gonna be like a bye week filler, and and he has to get into the end zone to pay off. And I just don't, I don't want to lock into a guy who has to get into the end zone in order for him to pay off.
Yeah, I will say this: the machine learning stats, those are great and all, but all the hypothetical stats in the world don't give you actual fantasy points. So I do like the yards per carry over expectation, the machine learning stuff saying what he should have gotten. Can you plug in there that he hurt his knee? Right? Can you plug in a lot of the other things that go into these situations? No. So I'm still banking on the Patriots to split the backfield, and I'll take the cheaper option.
All right. So Britt plants are flagging Ezekiel Elliott. My second plant here is going to be a guy who I've been talking about over and over again, Cortland Sutton. ADP over at Underdog is 87.80. It's probably going to be a little bit higher than that now, only because, I mean, I know that Marvin Mims is getting a heavy steam just because of the injury to Jerry Jeudy. Cortland Sutton probably going about a round or two earlier than he used to be going because of the injury to Jeudy. Again, I'll say it over and over again. Joe Lombardi funnels targets to the X receiver in his offensive scheme. It's not to say that Jeudy working out of the slot can't be productive, because we saw Keenan Allen do it before, and we've seen guys do it before in New Orleans. I'm trying to remember. Oh, Lance Moore. Remember Lance Moore when he ended up with like 900 yards and 10 touchdowns that time? It still funnels targets to the X receiver. And I think people they're sleeping on Cortland Sutton. I know that the Broncos have a lot to prove, but again, I've always been about following the coaches in the system and seeing how the players fit into it, as opposed to what they did last year for, Nathaniel Hackett / Aaron Rodgers, which didn't work out at all. So give me Cortland Sutton where he's being drafted right now.
The Lance Moore name drop, one of my favorite touchdown dancers in NFL history, Lance Moore. I'm with you. With the Sutton, man. That's the role that everyone that has had the success in this offense, the Michael Thomas business. So I'm taking Sutton, especially now that Judy's out. It actually kind of stinks, because now it's kind of moving Sutton up, and we're not getting the discount we were getting.
Yeah, I think Sutton's kind of one of those guys that's similar to Deontay Johnson in how he's viewed in fantasy, in that he only had, 2 touchdowns last season. He actually had more targets than Jerry Jeudy had, but because he didn't score those touchdowns, he was kind of persona non grata. Now in this offense, I think that he's going to have a role. Although I do still think that Jeudy, had he not been injured, would have been the guy.
I'm bullish on everybody bouncing back into Endra this year anyways. So I'm all for it.
There's adults in the room now.
I don't understand what that even means, Kev.
I mean, getting rid of
Nathaniel Hackett's
out.
Oh,
Peyton's in.
there. Yeah, like, a guy that doesn't need an extra coach to watch the clock for him usually does.
Hey, that's my OC you're talking about now.
Yeah, good luck. Good luck.
So I was like the Adam Gase hiring was just, oh man. All right, so there we go. Those are our second flag plants here. Let's go around the room here because we're running short on time. We'll go around the room. You'll name your flag plant. You'll give your spiel, and then we'll just go in order here of each one's flag plants. And then at the end, if you want to shit on somebody's choice, which I'm sure one of us will, then you can do it. So I'll start off here with Kev Tompkins.
Am I allowed to spout off more machine learning stats, or are those persona non grata?
You can do whatever you want, baby.
No,
this is your
get them in there. They're good.
Forum. This is your floor.
All right.
I like those hats.
All right. I think Zach Charbonnet will score more fantasy points than Ken Walker this year. Look, there's a reason why Seattle went back to the well in 2023 to draft the second consecutive second-round running back. And in fantasy, we're doing this again. Last year, it was Rashad Penny and Ken Walker. This year, now it's Zach Charbonnet and Ken Walker. So, look, Ken Walker is always profiled as a J.K. Dobbins type, the breakaway type running back that kind of profiled as a zero RB stud last year. And he was. He paid off. Only had a 35% success rate, which was the third worst behind Dalvin Cook and Zeke Elliott among backs with 200-plus carries. But the knock in his game has always been receiving. He ran less than 10 routes per game in college compared to Breece Hall, who ran over 21 routes per game in college. So that's clearly is not his forte. His yards per route run, 0.45, the lowest of all day 1 to day 2 running backs since 2015 that come out. And then we're looking at his yards per out run last year, 0.63, the fourth worst among backs with 25 plus receptions next to Taylor, Zeke, and Miles Sanders. Now you add Zach Charbonnet with multiple paths to not only receptions, but goal line. Zach Charbonnet is going to lead this team in high value touches this year. We're going to look at Walker as when he gets his touchdowns, it's going to be a lot of the explosive plays, the big 40, 50 yard runs. But I don't think we're going to see him a lot in the short yardage game because of his, lackluster success rate. And then just looking at cost, you have to take Ken Walker in the early 5th versus Zach Charbonnet in the late 9th on a team in Seattle where, yeah, they drafted Jackson Smith and Jigba, but they still do want to run the ball. Pete Carroll's going to be chopping his gum a lot on the sideline watching this run game thrive. It's going to be on the back of Zach Charbonnet, not so much Ken Walker.
My third flag plant here is going to be Calvin Ridley. I have been talking about Ridley basically since he came back. Coop and I have done the quick out fantasy shows, and I've never wavered on drafting Calvin Ridley. And this was back when he was going more around 4 or 5. Now we see him moving all the way up into early round 3 in some league formats here. The guy did not miss a year due to injury. He missed a year due to suspension. So he's not someone that you have to really worry about if he can bounce back correctly from some offseason surgery or some sort of major thing that took him out for a season. The last time we saw him on the field for a full NFL year, he was wide receiver 5 in PPR formats. And I am just bullish on the Jacksonville offense in general. They have the number 1 overall pick 2 years ago in Trevor Lawrence as their quarterback, who after a rookie season with Urban Meyer really just tanking that team, broke out last year, had the year that I think many people thought we would have seen from him as a rookie. Now I think he's going to progress, and I've been bullish on Lawrence, thinking we can see Lawrence putting up more of Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert type passing numbers this year, and that's only going to mean that good things are coming from Calvin Ridley. We're now at re-slots that entire offense. Christian Kirk, as much as they paid him, is not a true number 1 wide receiver in the NFL. He's the number 2. Zay Jones is not a number 2 wide receiver in the NFL. He's a wide receiver 3. Now you're putting Calvin Ridley as that wide receiver 1. Kirk is a 2. Jones is a 3. And from everything you've heard out of camp, from even some of the highlights from that first preseason game, Calvin Ridley's still a boss. He's still out there making ridiculous catches, able to get that separation. This is the guy that I think Trevor Lawrence needs to get put over the top. I think Trevor Lawrence is the quarterback that can get Calvin Ridley back into being a top 10, top 12 fantasy wide receiver in PPR.
I love that pick, John. My third and final flag plant is that Anthony Richardson will finish as a low-end QB1. So I realized that he was touted as kind of a developmental prospect, but I didn't hear the fantasy community harping on Justin Fields, who still admittedly has a lot of development to do as a passer. Richardson athletic profile is absolutely out of this world. Yeah, his preseason stats didn't look that good, but he showed off that rushing ability and he showed off his arm. He's going to be a viable fantasy option regardless of how good he is as a passer. And with Shane Steichen at head coach throughout the year, he's going to get developed and he's going to kind of find his rhythm and build some rapport with Michael Pittman, with rookie Josh Downs, with second-year guy Alec Pierce. They also play in a very soft division. I love Anthony Richardson, and where he's going, there's nowhere to go but up.
Boom. I'm going to plant my flag on another rookie here. And I'm the one that wrote the full breakdown on rookie tight ends and why it's so hard for them to break out for fantasy football. You can find that article on Fantasy Alarm. Just Google Andrew Cooper Dynasty tight end concepts. It comes right up. And the issue for rookie tight ends is that they not only have to be the best pass catcher in the tight end room, which is already a tough hurdle. Guys like, Dallas Goedert had to wait behind Zach Ertz, Cole Kmet behind Jimmy Graham, but they also need to be a top 2 target on the team to really have upside for fantasy football. Those conditions very rarely happen, which is why I'm the one that usually pours cold water on the tight ends. But this year, Dalton Kincaid is in the exact spot to do what we need him to do to be fantasy relevant. And people say, oh, well, what happens if he splits snaps with Dawson Knox? Brandon Beane already came out and said that these guys are basically playing different positions. Dawson Knox is going to be the inline tight end. Dalton Kincaid is going to be playing in the slot. And even if he doesn't play 100% of the snaps from the slot, I watched Cole Beasley at age 30, 31, and 32 play 68, 63, and 58% of the snaps in those years. And in all 3 years, he had back-to-back 100-plus target seasons. Anything that Cole Beasley can do with Josh Allen, I am confident that first-round pick that they traded up for Dalton Kincaid can do as well. So I'm taking that guy in virtually every draft. Even if I take a guy like Darren Waller, I'll circle back and take Dalton Kincaid. But a lot of times I just wait and take Kincaid and maybe throw another boring guy on the bench just in case. But this guy, I'm taking him in pretty much every league because he's one of the rare, not even just rookies, but tight ends in general that could be a top 2 target on a high volume offense.
All right, my last flag plant, and here we go. Just for Chris Medich in the chat, a flag plant's a player that we're we're in on 100%. We recommend that you draft this player. We are taking this player either at his ADP, maybe even a little bit early, because we really want this guy. My last flag plant is going to Brandon Cooks, wide receiver for the Dallas Cowboys, ADP of 84.80. I got to tell you, I think that, everybody kind of underestimates Cooks in a lot of ways. 6 out of the last 8 seasons, it's 1,000 yards, minimum of 5 touchdowns. He thrives even more when he's the number 2 and he's, and somebody else is drawing away the top coverage. We saw him, excel in New Orleans as the secondary receiver. And then all of a sudden, the Rams tried to make him a featured receiver. No, they got Cooper Kupp there also. So Cooks was doing well there. When he was on his own in New England, it didn't work. They didn't really have anybody, and he didn't fit that whole scheme. Now we're sitting here and we're looking at Brandon Cooks as the number 2 wide receiver in Dallas, next to CeeDee Lamb. No Dalton Schultz over there. Not sure what the tight end situation is. Michael Gallup is the wide receiver 3. Brandon Cooks is going to eat up some serious targets. I think I'd be very surprised. I think I actually said it on one of the shows that this foam football in my hand right now, this one here, I will eat it if Brandon Cooks does not come away with 1,000-yard season this year. I will eat it on camera. So from Underdog Fantasy, 84.80 ADP, yum, give me some. I'm all in on Brandon Cooks.
Be sure that's not a peep their vendor?
100% positive.
Okay, just check.
Oldest trick in the book.
A reminder here before anybody wants to crap on somebody else's flag plant there, fantasyalarm.com/underdog. All right, that's it. Use the promo code ALARM. It gets you 100% match deposit for first-time depositors. Playing all of their contests, the Best Ball Mania 4, the weekly winners, the Pick'em contest, higher, lower, all sorts of great stuff like that. fantasyalarm.com/underdog. Wow, we're running real short on time here. Final thoughts from around the room?
Oddly and disappointingly, I'm in on all those guys, so I got nothing to argue about.
I've had no shares of Charbonnet, but maybe I'll grab one now.
Yep, I think they're all excellent flag plants.
Yeah, whoever did that Charbonnet one, did a great job.
Genius.
I wish he used more random statistics in order to make his point.
There's many more random statistics for that.
I think Kev needs an article, a dictionary article on what these statistics
They will all be in the target report this year, by the way.
Editor,
something to think about.
Editor,
right, that's going to
always
do it
wants
for us
articles.
here on the show today. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We really appreciate it. Stay tuned here to the Fantasy Alarm YouTube page. Plenty more action coming up. I'm Howard Bender. For this whole crew, we'll catch you next time.